Have you ever wondered why a single bite of something sweet can feel like happiness itself? Why a child reaches for sugar before they even understand the word for it? That reaction did not begin with candy, or soda, or birthday cake. It began millions of years ago, in the branches of ancient trees, long before there were humans at all. To understand when humans first tasted sugar, we have to go back further than humans. We have to go back to the ancestors of every primate alive today, moving through dense forest canopies in search of one thing above all else: ripe fruit. Fruit was rare, fruit was seasonal, and fruit, unlike leaves or bark, was packed with something extraordinary: a fast, clean burst of energy in the form of natural sugar. For an animal living hand to mouth in a world without refrigerators or grocery stores, finding a tree full of ripe fruit was like finding a fortune. And evolution rewards animals that recognize fortune when they see it. Somewhere between 15 and 20 million years ago, something changed inside the bodies of our ancestors. A single genetic mutation altered the way their bodies processed a sugar called fructose. That mutation seems small on paper. In practice, it rewired survival itself. Before the mutation, fructose was simply used for energy and then cleared away. After it, the body began converting fructose into fat far more efficiently, and it began doing something else: raising uric acid levels in the blood in a way that made the body hold on to that fat even harder. In the modern world, we think of this as a health problem, but picture the ancient world instead. Picture an animal facing months of scarcity, dry seasons, unpredictable famine. An animal that could turn a rare feast of fruit into stored fat had a devastating advantage. It could survive the lean months that killed its cousins. In other words, the sweet tooth was not a flaw. It was a survival tool, sharpened by millions of years of hunger. By the time early hominins split off from other apes, that hunger for sugar was already deeply written into the brain, and it was about to meet a food source even more powerful than fruit. Somewhere in the forests and savannas of Africa, an early human ancestor looked up and saw something moving in a hollow tree: a cloud of wings, a low, constant hum, and underneath it, hidden inside the bark, something almost unbelievable for its time: a substance so dense with pure sugar that a single mouthful could outmatch an entire day of foraging. Honey. Wild honey is one of the most calorie-dense foods that exists in nature, and unlike fruit, it does not disappear after one season. It sits, protected and concentrated, guarded by thousands of stinging defenders. To reach it, early humans had to do something that set them apart from almost every other animal on Earth. They had to risk pain for a reward they could not yet see. Some scientists studying the diets and behavior of early hominins believe honey may have played a far larger role in the human story than we once assumed. Researchers looking at the modern Hadza people of Tanzania, one of the last honey hunting societies on Earth, discovered something remarkable. Honey can make up as much as 15% of their caloric intake for parts of the year. 15% from a food source most of us think of today as a garnish for tea. If honey played anything close to that role for early humans, then sugar was not a rare treat in our ancestral past. It may have been one of the most important sources of concentrated energy available to the growing human brain, and the brain needed that energy badly. The human brain, compared to body size, is unusually large and unusually expensive to run. It consumes a disproportionate share of the body's daily energy, even at rest. Some researchers argue that without dense, quick sources of fuel like honey and ripe fruit, the metabolic cost of building bigger brains may have been far harder to sustain. Sugar in this light was not simply pleasure. It may have been fuel for the very thing that made us human in the first place. But there is another partner in this story, one many people never consider. Humans did not find honey alone. Across parts of Africa today, a small brown bird called the honey guide has developed one of the strangest relationships in the animal kingdom. It cannot break into a beehive on its own. So instead, it does something astonishing. It finds humans and it calls to them, a specific, insistent chattering call that means one thing: follow me. It leads hunters through the bush, straight to a hidden hive, waiting patiently while the humans smoke out the bees and break open the nest. In return, the bird gets the wax and the larvae it cannot reach alone. This partnership may be tens of thousands of years old. It suggests that the human hunt for sugar was not just a solitary act of survival. It was, in some places, a cooperative ritual between species, an ancient alliance built entirely around one shared goal: the reward hidden inside a beehive. We do not need to imagine what this hunt looked like. In a cave in Spain called the Cueva de la Araña, the Cave of the Spider, ancient artists left behind a scene that has survived for roughly 8,000 years. A human figure painted in deep red pigment is shown climbing a rope-like structure to reach a wild hive, surrounded by the swirling shapes of angry bees. It is one of the oldest depictions of a human activity ever discovered, and it captures something timeless. Even 8,000 years ago, humans thought this moment was worth remembering. But if you were to travel back even further, tens of thousands of years before that painting was made, and ask an early human where sugar came from, honey would have been only only part of the answer. There would have been wild berries, bursting sweetness in late summer, wild figs, dates in desert oases, tubers that turned starchy sweetness into food when roasted over fire. Sugar in this era was never separated from the rest of nature. It was hidden inside things. It had to be found, chased, climbed for, or dug out of the ground. There was no such thing as sugar on its own. Not yet. That changes with a discovery made not in Africa, not in Europe, but on a group of islands most people rarely think about at all: New Guinea. Sometime around 8,000 years ago, communities living in the highlands of New Guinea began doing something no humans are known to have done before. They began deliberately cultivating a tall, fibrous grass, selecting and replanting the sweetest stalks generation after generation. That grass was sugarcane. At first, it was not processed into anything resembling the sugar we know today. People simply chewed the raw stalks, sucking out the sweet juice and spitting out the fiber, much like chewing sugarcane in parts of the world still today. It was celebrated, prized, even treated with a kind of reverence in some island cultures, appearing in ceremonies and origin myths as a gift from the gods, but it stayed mostly local for thousands of years, a regional secret of the Pacific. Then it began to move. Sugarcane slowly spread westward, carried by trade and migration into Southeast Asia and eventually into India, sometime within the last few thousand years. And in India, something happened that changed the entire trajectory of sugar's history. People discovered that if you boiled and reduced the juice of sugarcane, you could concentrate it into a thick, crystalline substance, something solid, storable, transportable. Ancient Sanskrit texts describe this substance using a word that would eventually travel across languages and centuries: sharkara. That word is the ancestor of our modern word, sugar. For the very first time in human history, sugar was no longer something you had to chase through a forest or steal from angry bees. It was something you could make, something you could store in a jar, something you could carry across a mountain range and sell to someone who had never even seen where it came from. This single shift from foraged sweetness to manufactured sweetness may be one of the most underrated turning points in human history. From India, the knowledge of sugar crystallization slowly traveled along trade routes into Persia and eventually into the expanding Islamic world during the medieval period. It was there that sugar refinement was transformed into something closer to a science. New techniques for boiling, purifying, and whitening sugar emerged. Sugar mills spread across the Middle East and North Africa. For centuries, sugar was still rare enough and valuable enough that it was treated less like food and more like medicine. Physicians in the medieval Islamic world prescribed sugar for ailments ranging from coughs to heart trouble. It was sold in small quantities by apothecaries alongside spices, wrapped and weighed like something precious. To most of the world at this point, sugar was still a luxury reserved almost entirely for the wealthy and the powerful, a gift for royalty, a spice for kings. That too was about to change, and not in a gentle way. When European traders and explorers encountered sugarcane cultivation, they saw not medicine, not ceremony, but opportunity on a massive scale. Sugarcane needs a hot, humid climate and enormous amounts of labor to grow and process. Starting in the 1500s, European powers began establishing sugar plantations across the Caribbean, Brazil, and other parts of the Americas, and they built this new industry on a foundation of almost unimaginable human suffering. The forced labor of millions of enslaved people transported across the Atlantic specifically to grow and process this one crop. It is a difficult truth, but an essential one. The sweetness that once symbolized survival, celebration, and even divine gift in ancient cultures became, for a brutal stretch of history, one of the most valuable and most devastating commodities on earth. Sugar built fortunes, it built empires, and it did so at an enormous human cost. By the 1700s and 1800s, sugar was no longer a rare luxury confined to royal courts. It was flowing into European kitchens in growing quantities, sweetening tea, coffee, and chocolate, three bitter drinks that had recently arrived from distant parts of the world, and that sugar helped transform into some of the most popular beverages on the planet. And then came a second revolution, quieter than the first, but just as transformative. In the early 1800s, chemists in Europe discovered that sugar could also be extracted efficiently from an entirely different plant, the humble sugar beet, which could be grown in temperate climates far from the tropics. Suddenly, countries that could never grow sugarcane could produce sugar of their own. Prices fell, supply grew. What had once been so rare that it was locked away and weighed like gold slowly became something almost anyone could afford. By the time industrial food production emerged in the 20th century, sugar had completed one of the most dramatic transformations of any substance in human history. It had gone from a hidden treasure inside a wild beehive, defended by stinging insects and found only a few times a year, to an ingredient so common it is added, often invisibly, to thousands of everyday products: bread, sauces, drinks, cereals, items that never would have been considered sweet foods at all. And here is the part that should genuinely stop you and make you think. The craving driving all of this. It is the same craving. wired into the same ancient brain circuitry that helped a hungry primate survive a famine 15 million years ago. We did not evolve to resist sugar. We evolved to seek it desperately, because for almost the entire span of our evolutionary history, sugar was rare, valuable, and worth almost any risk to obtain. The problem is not that our bodies changed. The problem is that the world around us changed instead, and it changed far faster than evolution ever could. For millions of years, craving sugar meant climbing toward a beehive, or waiting for a fruit tree to ripen, or braving stings and unknown dangers for a rare and fleeting reward. Today, that same craving means walking a few feet to a kitchen counter, or a vending machine, or a drive-through window. The instinct has not changed at all. Only the distance between desire and reward has collapsed. So the next time you feel that unmistakable pull towards something sweet, you are not simply craving a snack. You are feeling the echo of an ancient survival strategy, one carried down through millions of years, through fruit-eating primates and honey-hunting ancestors, through cave painters and sugarcane farmers, through empires built and lives lost, all the way into your own body in this very moment. That craving helped your ancestors survive a world of scarcity. The question now facing all of us is, what happens when that same ancient instinct meets a world of abundance? If this made you see something as ordinary as sugar in a completely different light, imagine what else is hiding in plain sight. Subscribe, and let's keep uncovering the hidden history behind the things we never think to question.